Hello everyone, I'm the okayest bassist, and today we're going to look at something a little bit different due to my recording setup and general inexperience in videos. I don't exactly have a great way of showing you what I wanted to show you live. I tried figuring it out. It didn't work. So I have some still images with notes, and then I'm basically just going to do this as a voiceover. If you have any tips on how I could do this better going forward, if I have another instructional video that requires like a close-up, please let me know. But either way, when you get a new bass, most of the time when it comes out of the box, it's not properly set up for you. Plenty of them come out completely playable. Plenty of them come out and have a nice setup in general. But on the whole, each player prefers something slightly different. Plenty of people want the strings super low, just a hair above causing any fret buzz. Some people prefer a specific spacing of their strings from fret to string. Some people prefer wider string spacing, more narrow string spacing. Some people prefer to keep their necks completely flat. Some people prefer to have their necks with a slight forward bow. So there are plenty of videos out there about this, but I figured I would go over my setups and how I do them, mostly because, as most of you know, I always change my strings when I get a new instrument. I change them out to Diodario ETB 92-5s if it's a 5-string, or the regular 92s, or depending on their scale length. As such, the tension difference does make a lot of change when it comes to the playability. If they're high tension rounds, or more so if they're flats, they're gonna have a lot more bowing to the neck. There's more pressure being pulled on from the headstock, or the lack of a headstock in my case, typically where it's headless. But as such, the tension differences are going to make more of a bow to the neck when there's higher tension, and it's going to flatten the neck out if there's less tension. So there are a lot of times I've had to do, very rarely do I have to do a truss rod adjustment, which I don't go over in this, just because personally I try to avoid adjusting a truss rod unless I know that it is needed. I am going to show you how to test if your truss rod needs adjusted, but I am not going to give advice on when and how to adjust that truss rod, more than testing it and seeing if it's okay. But we'll get into that here. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and start. Okay. So the first thing we will see here is that when I got done switching the strings, this is on a Sterling Ray 2, there were about 8 millimeters worth of space from the bottom of the string to the top of the fret. This is a closer view so that you can kind of get an idea. The string spacing was very high. From that, the first thing I check is to make sure, is the truss rod good? Is the truss rod set to the point where it is the problem? Is there too much bowing of the neck? Or is it simply the string height? So in order to do that, you're going to take one hand, hold down on the first fret. Then you will, with your other hand, obviously helps to have this laying flat somewhere. You're going to I use my pinky and hold down on the 13th fret. And then I use my index finger or thumb to tap from string just above the 7th fret itself, not in between the frets. If you hear that there's some movement and a tinking sound, like an actual strike, then you know that you are having some string space. At that point, it's a matter of how much space do you want. I typically prefer 1 or less millimeters. Then you know if your truss rod is actually adjusted well enough that you can move on. If it is, cool. If it's not, you're going to need to look at doing a truss rod adjustment. Again, I am not giving advice on that. But basically, you adjust the truss rod one way or another to have it flatten the neck out more or curve more as needed. Once you know your truss rod is properly adjusted, or at least good enough for you, which is my case, The next thing you're going to look at is the string height, your actual height adjustment at your bridge. When doing it, there are multiple systems, but most of them use an Allen key or a hex key, whatever you want to call it. When you're doing that, turning right adds height, turning left makes it lower. You can see on this picture that when I got my Ray 2, it actually was almost maxed out for height, especially on the A string. You can see that you can't even see the top of the screw, but when I was done, you could just barely see the top of the screw. So I'm not saying like they maxed it out as a screw up. It did need to be adjusted a decent bit, but going back and forth between the photos, you can see there was quite a bit on the strings for the outside of the neck where I tried to follow the radius as well as possible, that there was quite a bit that was backed out. So I did have to lower it quite a bit. Once you've adjusted the string height, of course, tune it back up to the standard tuning that you're going to use. If you're going to use standard, cool. If you're going to use drop, anything, whatever, just make sure you have it tuned again. I will note it is best when you're doing this, if you're doing it with brand new strings, make sure to stretch your strings a little bit, as they're going to lose some of that tuning as they start to stretch out, like all new strings do. So I always recommend putting them on, getting them to tune, give them a good set of stretches, then come back through, do a set of adjustments, whether that's checking your truss rod, then adjusting string height, what have you. Between each of these steps, you should be tuning back to your standard tuning you're going to use, and then making sure that you've stretched those strings in between so that you don't end up having the string stretch out partway through one of the setups and then giving you trouble later. After you've done the string height, you need to make sure to set your intonation, how in tune the string is with itself. The way you would need to test that is strike the open string, whether that's with a slap, whether that's with a finger pluck, whatever, a pick, what have you. As soon as it shows on your tuner that it's ringing true, fret the 12th fret, do the same thing, and see if it shows that it's in the same amount of tune. If it shows that it's a few cents flat or a few cents sharp, then you need to go to, in this case, the bottom side of the bridge. There's a screw to adjust how forward or backward on the string the saddle is sitting. In this case, if it's a screw system, you're going to turn it right if the pitch is high. You're going to turn it left if the pitch is low. So if it's flat, turn it left. If it's sharp, turn it right. That will help you to adjust. Again, after each, and you're going to want to adjust this minorly. I mean, I do like maybe a half turn. And then again, check your open string tune, check your 12th fret tuning. Once you're done with all of the strings and they all ring true with open and with the 12th fret, then again, you're going to want to stretch the strings one more time and check the open string tuning, make sure everything looks good. When I was done, instead of 8 millimeters of space, I had about 2. That's typically where I prefer, is between 2 and 3 millimeters. So that had me set to the play height that I prefer. Then it was much more comfortable. If you go through all of these steps one after the other, and then you find when you get to the end, you have another problem. Say after all the strings have been properly stretched, you've gotten your intonation set, and now you find that where there wasn't string buzz before, there is now. That can definitely happen, especially as those strings start to stretch and acclimate. If you got it shipped to you when it was cold outside, the strings may warm up and expand on their own. If you got it shipped and it was really hot outside, now you bring it in and your house is air conditioned and it's colder, the strings may slightly tighten up. Once you've done all these adjustments, there's nothing wrong with going back to do them again. Just keep in mind that adjusting string height or intonation is moving that saddle in accordance to the string when opposed to where that string sits rested on the nut. So even minor adjustments, if you think of it in a 3D axis, a minor adjustment over that long spacing makes a decent difference. So I would recommend, if you do adjust the string height again, or if you get all the way to the end and you have slight string buzz and you check your truss rod again, I recommend once you're completely done, quote, quote, completely done with your setup, double check everything one time through. If now you find that after you've adjusted string height and intonation and all of that is good, that now you don't have any space, you may need to go back and look at either raising the string height. But if you're fretting on the 1st and 13th and you don't have that space, that is a truss rod adjustment you're going to have to do. So again, I would recommend go through all the steps. Once you're done with the steps, double check, make sure you're stretching strings between each step. It's just going to be a good way when you have brand new strings, which is when you should test your setups anyway. Then when you're, as I said, quote, quote, done, go back through, try it all again. If it all seems good after a second thorough check, then you should be good. As always, thank you for stopping by. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.